MTG calls for Biden to resign after direct evidence of money laundering. The Congresswoman called on Biden to step down after the House Oversight Committee released damning evidence of $200,000 laundered through Joe's bro, Jim, right? Jim Biden had received a payment of that amount from an influence peddling operation he conducted with Hunter Biden. And immediately after receiving the dirty money, he wrote a check to Joe. Now, this money came from a failing hospital operator named AmeriCorps that was seeking political influence from the Biden family. That, my friends, is called money laundering and bribery. Marjorie Taylor Greene says it's time for Joe to go, and she joins us right now. Congresswoman, thank you so much for pressing, keeping the heat on them like you always do. I thought that Joe never took a dime directly from any of these dirty deals. Remember, that's what the corporate media has told us over and over and over again.
That's right. And that's also what Joe Biden himself has told us, that he's never taken any money and that he knows nothing about his son's business deals. But with the investigation that we have led on the Oversight Committee, we have uncovered real evidence. And that $200,000 check is exactly what you said, Gina. It's money laundering. And this should be no activity taking place by the President of the United States, the former Vice President, or any office holder. As a matter of fact, most people go to jail when they get caught for money laundering. Joe Biden should resign. And if we can't get him to resign, which I'm sure he won't, I am all in favor of impeachment. I have been in favor of impeachment ever since Joe Biden became president.
There's no doubt about that. You have been right at the front of this, right from the very beginning, Congresswoman. You called it, and you knew something was fishy. You smelled it. So what about impeachment at this point? Where, now that there's a Speaker of the House, where does the House impeachment inquiry go from here? What's your sense of a timetable, this evidence? How is this going to proceed? What's your sense?
Well, the good news is we are still proceeding with our impeachment inquiry. As a matter of fact, we've never stopped. We still have more bank statements and records coming in from the subpoenas that we have sent out. And with Chairman Comer, we are aggressively pursuing, following where the money leads. And that's exactly the best way to investigate it. That's how we came across this $200,000 check. And I'll let you know something, there's going to be more of those coming out. But what we have to do is we have to make sure that we line up the evidence, because just because people like me and people like watching this program do believe Joe Biden should be impeached, we have to have all Republicans vote for it. We need 217 votes on the House floor in order to impeach Joe Biden. And in order to get them to vote for it, we have to produce the evidence to persuade many Republicans to cast that vote for impeachment. As hard as it may seem to us that they won't cast it now, we have to prove it to them, and hopefully that's what we'll be able to do.
Just a quick follow-up, real quick. Did you say that you expect more evidence showing that checks were written to Joe Biden? Is that what you're saying? Just making sure that's what you're saying.
Yes, I expect to see that.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought up that 217 number, because we've been hearing that number over and over again as this whole speaker debate took place and ultimately the election of a new speaker. But we're not hearing a lot yet out of the new speaker. MTG wanted to give you a chance to tell us what you're hearing. What's he going to do first? When are we going to hear some fireworks out of this?
Well, our new speaker, Mike Johnson, hasn't been our speaker for 1 week yet. And I will let you know he has been very busy throughout the past week hiring up staff. The Speaker of the House is a big job. Not only do they perform duties as Speaker of the House, they also have to manage the entire Capitol, including the security and the visitor center. That's why we always point to Nancy Pelosi for the security failure on January 6th, because the Speaker of the House is in charge of that. It also is a big operation. And so Speaker Mike Johnson has been busy settling into his new role. And we look forward to hearing more from him. We did have a conference call the other night where he talked about aid to Israel, talked about the money that Joe Biden wants for Ukraine. And I'll go ahead and tell you guys, I'm against the foreign wars. I've sent no money to Ukraine. And I believe if we're going to send aid to Israel, I'd like to see the Democrats in the Senate pick up the defense and state and foreign ops bills and pass those, because that has $3.8 billion ready to go to Israel to help them out with weapons, defense, and their Iron Dome. But the Democrats won't do anything about it, and Joe Biden isn't interested in doing that. He just wants another blank check, because that's how Joe Biden works. He just sends checks to everyone, and of course always ends up providing some sort of political favors to go along with it. And then his family usually is enriched the other way around. So I'd like to hear more from our speaker about what he's planning to do. I'll continue to vote no on money to Ukraine. There's a lot of evidence that there's serious fraud going on there, money laundering as well, and that war just needs to end.
What about Congresswoman money specifically to Israel? Because on Thursday, it looks like there will probably be a vote on money that would go to Israel, about $14 billion. But the offset here, the offset is to cut $14 billion of IRS funding. What do you make of something like that? Where's your temperature on that right now?
Well, just as I stated before, David, we've got $3.8 billion ready to go to Israel in the defense and state and foreign ops. I believe our border is the problem and the serious issue we should be focusing on. You know, my platform and policy perspective is America first. Of course, I stand with Israel, our friends and allies over there, and I support them in their war against Hamas. They were attacked horrifically, and they should respond, and they are responding. Israel's also a strong, independent nation, and they're a nuclear-armed nation, which makes them not anybody that can just be pushed around. Their Israel Defense Force is one of the strongest militaries in the world, and I am very confident in their ability to defeat Hamas, those evil terrorists. But what I think I want to hear is I want to hear more details. You see, it's not easily so-called paid for out of the IRS. And the money, the $14 billion, the 87,000 IRS agents have already been unfunded, defunded for the rest of this cycle. And I'd like to hear more about how that works. I think if we're going to take any money and give it to Israel, I could be in support of taking money away from these universities and colleges where these protests are going on, pro-Hamas protests. I'd be interested in taking money away from, say, France, that has many different Islamists in their country. There should be no country receiving money from America that is supporting terrorists. So I want to hear some different ideas.
Yep.
I like that. So essentially what you're saying is there's already a bill that's out there that has $3.8 billion funding for Israel in it, but it also funds our border, it sounds like. And you're saying if it's not attached to that, then it should be attached to something else. But as far as writing blank checks from the taxpayers to go anywhere to fund any wars, you're saying that's not a good idea because we have an invasion on our own border. So clarify if I got that part right. But the second part of my question is, how can we help you? What phone calls can we make? What can we say? What can we do?
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, let me clarify that. We've passed H.R. 2 out of the House, and it's sitting in the Senate, and that is complete border security for America. The Democrats in the Senate have done nothing with it. We've also passed the defense and the state foreign ops appropriation bills, and those bills contain $3.8 billion for military weapons, ammunition, defense, and also replenishment of the Iron Dome for Israel. That money is specifically for Israel. And the Democrats in the Senate and Joe Biden have done nothing with those bills. That's money that could go straight to Israel today if they would pass them and Joe Biden would sign them into law. And I believe we have to prioritize our border first because we have over 1.5 million gotaways in our country. And many of those could be terrorists that are right here in the homeland.
Let me turn real quick to something Israel-related, Congresswoman. Jake Tapper, he's a piece of work. Rashida Tlaib, she's a piece of work. These people really, it's just horrible to hear what they're having to say. Jake Tapper, on CNN the other day, just totally lit into you. He didn't spend any time getting on Rashida Tlaib's horrible, stance and verbiage, but he took his time to go after you. We want to play that and get your reaction. Have a look.
You're never going to believe who the Republican offering this motion to censure Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is. I want you to take a guess. Go ahead. Take a guess. That's right. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And it gets worse, because when you read Greene's resolution, you realize it is written by someone who seems to have learned about the Arab-Israeli conflict maybe 10 minutes before, who maybe didn't even have access to Wikipedia. And B, while there are plenty of valid criticisms of Congresswoman Tlaib, this resolution twists a bunch of things that she said beyond recognition. And C, the resolution seems much more focused on January 6th than it does on October 7th. Throughout its pages, Marjorie Taylor Greene describes this act of civil disobedience from a bunch of left-wing Jewish groups that are critical of Israel's government, this act as an insurrection. This is not an insurrection. It might be a bunch of folks with whom you disagree. It might be a bunch of people you think are misguided, acting in a way you don't like. But this is not an insurrection. Anti-Semitism is not a cudgel to be used against people for political points. Nor is Islamophobia or racism or anti-gay behavior or misogyny or any other kind of bigotry. Just over 3 weeks ago, 1,400 people, mostly Jews, mostly civilians, were slaughtered here in some of the cruelest and most unimaginable ways, in the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. This is not a game.
It's disgusting what he was saying. I want to give you an opportunity to respond. Clearly, it's Tapper Tlaib in 2024. What's your sense?
Yeah, he's definitely a Rashida Tlaib apologist, and he's also standing with Hamas and the groups that performed an insurrection into the Capitol complex, coming into the Cannon House office building. You know, several of them were charged with assaulting police officers. This was not the peaceful group that Jake Tapper showed to pick and chose his video images to show. I'll also let you know, I don't watch Jake Tapper. I don't know him personally. I've never even talked to him. He knows nothing about me. So he has no right to assume and lie about my opinions and my beliefs as a person. So I'm highly offended by Jake Tapper. And really, I'm appalled that he would go to such an extent to make sure that he carefully walks the line of defending Rashida Tlaib, the most pro-terrorist, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic member of Congress in United States history. And censure is not far enough. This is a woman that should be expelled from Congress. Shame on Jake Tapper. Shame on CNN for putting that message out, and shame on anyone that believes those lies.
Well, no shame on you, MTG. Anybody that has those views that you just told us and doesn't look at Wikipedia because it's full of liberal malarkey is a friend of mine. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for your fight and for all you do for us out in Washington, D.C.